A young elephant kept returning to a sanctuary fence every single morning, no matter how hard the rain fell or how dangerous the journey became. And when rescuers finally discovered what she was carrying beneath her body, they realized they were witnessing something that would challenge everything science understood about animal intelligence. But what could drive a mother to give up her freedom, fight against her entire herd, and risk her life traveling through storms just to reach a place she had left behind 6 months earlier? The first raindrops of monsoon season hit the ground at the Elephant Nature Park in northern Thailand as Dr. Siraporn Chantra stood at the fence line, staring at something that made no sense. There, exactly where the forest met the sanctuary boundary, stood Molly, a 4-year-old elephant the team had released back into the wild 6 months ago. The young elephant stood perfectly still in the growing storm, her trunk touching the wooden fence posts as she made sounds so low that human ears could barely hear them. This was the 3rd time this week Molly had returned to this exact spot, and Dr. Chantra felt her stomach tighten with worry as she watched the elephant's strange behavior. Molly had come to the sanctuary 3 years earlier as a tiny orphan, rescued from a logging camp where her mother had died from injuries and exhaustion. The baby elephant had been so small, so scared, that the staff wondered if she would survive her first week. But Molly proved stronger than anyone expected. Under the care of Bua, an older female elephant who lived at the sanctuary, Molly learned everything a young elephant needed to know. She learned which plants were good to eat and which ones would make her sick. She learned the warning calls that meant danger was near. She learned how to use mud to protect her skin from the burning sun and biting insects. By her 4th birthday, Molly was healthy, strong, and ready to join a wild herd that lived in the protected forest next to the sanctuary. The release had gone perfectly, better than the team had dared to hope. Molly walked into the forest with the wild elephants without looking back, seeming to forget the humans who had raised her. Dr. Chantra and her team celebrated another success, adding Molly's name to the list of elephants they had saved and returned to the wild. But now Molly was back, and something was terribly wrong. Dr. Chantra pulled out her notes and read through the reports from the past 3 weeks. Molly's visits had started slowly, just once every few days. But now she came almost every morning, always at dawn, always to the same spot, always alone. The young elephant looked worse each time she appeared. Her ribs showed through her gray skin, sharp lines that spoke of hunger and stress. Her skin looked dry and dusty instead of healthy and smooth. Fresh cuts and bite marks covered her back legs and sides, wounds that looked like they came from other elephants attacking her. Somchai, the head elephant keeper, walked up beside Dr. Chantra and handed her a cup of hot tea. His weathered face looked troubled as he watched Molly through the fence. Somchai had worked with elephants for 30 years, and he knew their behavior better than anyone at the sanctuary. He pointed to the forest behind Molly, where several large elephants stood among the trees about 300 feet away. The wild herd was watching Molly, but they would not come close to the fence. Their ears stood out wide from their heads, and they swayed back and forth, movements that meant they were upset or angry. Yet they never followed Molly to the sanctuary boundary, as if an invisible wall kept them from crossing into human-protected space. Dr. Chantra raised her camera and zoomed in on Molly's face. What she saw made her heart sink. Thick tears ran from the young elephant's eyes, leaving wet trails through the dust on her cheeks. Molly's trunk moved constantly, reaching toward the sanctuary buildings, then pulling back, then reaching forward again. It was the behavior of an elephant trying to make a decision, weighing choices that humans could not understand. The sounds Molly made were unlike anything Dr. Chantra had heard before. They were calls that mother elephants used when searching for lost babies. But there was something else in the sounds, something that felt like begging, like asking for help in a language that had no words. Why would a young elephant risk everything to return to a sanctuary she had successfully left behind? And what was the wild herd trying to prevent? At exactly 5:52 in the morning, Molly stepped out of the forest and into view, moving slowly through the mud and rain. Dr. Chantra lifted her camera, ready to document another mysterious visit, but then she saw something that made her gasp out loud. Hidden beneath Molly's body, protected from the rain by her mother's careful stance, was the tiniest baby elephant Dr. Chantra had ever seen. The calf could not have been more than 3 or 4 days old. Its skin still showed patches of pink through the thin covering of dark baby hair. The little elephant stumbled and swayed as it tried to keep up with Molly, its legs shaking with weakness and exhaustion. Molly moved with incredible care, constantly adjusting her position to keep the baby sheltered and safe. Her trunk never stopped touching the calf, checking its temperature, guiding its uncertain steps, offering comfort through gentle contact. When they reached the fence, Molly positioned her body so the baby stood between her and the wooden posts, creating a protected space that blocked the wind and rain. Then she began making the same low calls the team had recorded during her previous visits, but now the meaning was clear. Molly was not calling for herself. She was asking for help for her baby. Dr. Chantra's hands shook as she focused her camera on the calf. Even from 50 feet away, she could see that something was terribly wrong. The baby's eyes looked sunken, deep into its small head, a sign of dangerous dehydration. Its breathing came fast and shallow, each breath making a soft wheeze that suggested fluid in the lungs. The calf's tiny ribs showed clearly through its loose skin, and it seemed unable to stand without leaning against its mother's legs. Most troubling were the fresh wounds covering the baby's body, scrapes and puncture marks that could only have come from adult elephants attacking such a small, helpless creature. Niran, the sanctuary's animal behavior expert, stood beside Dr. Chantra with his mouth hanging open in shock. "This changes everything we know about how elephants think and plan," he whispered. Molly remembered being rescued here as a baby. She understood that humans saved her life, and now she has brought her own baby to the same place, expecting the same help. That requires memory, planning, and the ability to apply past experience to a new situation. That is intelligence we barely see in great apes. Dr. Chantra turned her attention to the wild herd standing in the forest behind Molly. Through her telephoto lens, she could now see their body language clearly, and the story it told was heartbreaking. The adult elephants showed all the signs of rejection and anger. Their ears flared wide, their trunks lifted high, and they swayed in agitation. These were not elephants worried about a lost herd member. These were elephants enforcing a decision, making sure a rule was followed. In wild elephant herds, when a calf was born too weak or sick to survive the long migrations and harsh conditions, the matriarch would sometimes order the baby abandoned. It was brutal, but it kept the whole herd safe and moving. A mother who stopped to care for a dying calf could slow down the entire group, putting everyone at risk. Somchai moved closer to the fence, studying Molly and her baby with the practiced eye of someone who had raised dozens of orphaned elephants. "Look at the calf's mouth," he said quietly. "Something is wrong with how it is shaped. See how it tries to nurse but cannot seem to latch on properly? And see how Molly's udder is full of milk, but the baby is starving? The calf cannot feed, which means it was born with some kind of defect that makes nursing impossible." Dr. Chantra felt tears running down her face as the full picture came into focus. Molly's baby had been born with a condition that made survival in the wild impossible. The herd's matriarch had recognized this and ordered the calf rejected, probably trying to force Molly to abandon her doomed infant and save her own strength. But Molly had refused. She had fought against the herd's decision, taking attacks and injuries to protect her baby. She had hidden the newborn in the forest while making these reconnaissance trips to the sanctuary, checking to see if the place that saved her life could save her daughter's life too. And now, with the calf finally strong enough to travel, Molly had brought her baby to the only place she knew where elephants received help no matter how sick or injured they were. The wild herd's loud trumpets and rumbles echoed through the rain. Several large females moved forward aggressively, testing whether they would dare come closer to the human territory. Their message was clear. They did not approve of Molly's choice to bring the rejected calf to the boundary between wild and human worlds. This was a challenge to the matriarch's authority, a refusal to accept the herd's decision about life and death. What could be so wrong with Molly's newborn that the entire wild herd had rejected her? And would the sanctuary's intervention come in time to save the baby elephant's life? The examination room lights seemed too bright, too harsh, as Dr. Chantra looked at the X-ray images of Molly's baby on the screen. Her hand covered her mouth as she understood exactly why the wild herd had rejected this tiny calf and why Molly had fought so desperately to reach the sanctuary. The baby, whom the staff now called Molly Knock, meaning Little Molly, had been born with a cleft palate. The roof of her mouth had not formed correctly, leaving a large opening that connected her mouth directly to her nose. This deformity made nursing nearly impossible, because the baby could not create the suction needed to draw milk from her mother. Even worse, when Molly Knock tried to drink, milk would flow up into her nose and down into her lungs, causing the dangerous fluid buildup that made her breathing sound so wrong. In the wild, such a birth defect meant certain death within days. A calf that could not nurse would starve, and any milk it managed to swallow would drown it from the inside as the liquid filled its lungs. The matriarch had seen this immediately after Molly Knock's birth and made the harsh decision that all wild animal leaders must sometimes make. The calf could not survive, so the herd would not waste energy and time trying to save it. The aggressive attacks from other herd members had been attempts to force Molly to abandon her baby and preserve her own health for future chances at motherhood. But what the matriarch could not know was that humans had the medical knowledge and tools to fix a cleft palate, to repair what nature had made wrong. Dr. Chantra called Dr. Michael Thompson, a veterinary surgeon in California who specialized in operating on exotic animals. Through a video call, she showed him the detailed images of Molly Knock's deformed palate, while the sedated baby lay on the examination table. Dr. Thompson studied the pictures for a long time before speaking. "The surgery can be done," he finally said. "I have performed similar operations on zoo elephants born with birth defects, but I must be honest about the risks. She is extremely young and very weak. The anesthesia required for surgery could kill her before we even begin. Even if the operation succeeds, she will need months of special care, hand feeding, and possibly more surgeries as she grows. The costs will be enormous, perhaps $50,000 or more." The sanctuary operated on donations and the money paid by tourists who visited to see the rescued elephants. Spending so much on one animal would mean taking resources away from the dozens of other elephants who depended on the sanctuary for food, medical care, and shelter. Dr. Chantra knew that some people would say she should let nature take its course, that saving one elephant with a genetic defect was not worth the cost when so many healthy elephants needed help. But as she watched through the observation window, while Somchai sat beside Molly in the recovery stall, she knew what her decision must be. Molly's trunk lay gently across her sleeping baby, maintaining constant contact even as veterinary staff moved around them checking monitors and adjusting IV lines. The young mother had fought her entire herd, endured attacks and isolation, walked through storms, and given up her freedom to bring her baby to this place. That kind of determination, that level of love and planning, deserved respect and help. "We are going to try to save her," Dr. Chantra announced to her team. I will ask our supporters around the world for emergency donations, and we will bring Dr. Thompson here to perform the surgery as soon as Molly Knock is strong enough. If Molly fought this hard to give her baby a chance, we must provide that chance. The Sanctuary social media posts about Molly and her baby spread across the internet like wildfire. People from dozens of countries sent messages of support and donations large and small. Within 36 hours, the Sanctuary had received over $80,000, more than enough to pay for the surgery and months of recovery care. Dr. Thompson arrived 3 days later with cases full of specialized surgical equipment. He spent hours examining Molly Knock, measuring the extent of the defect, planning exactly how to reconstruct the damaged bones and tissue in her tiny mouth. The surgery took place on a Wednesday morning and lasted 6 hours. Dr. Thompson worked with steady hands, carefully rebuilding the roof of Molly Knock's mouth, using small titanium plates and screws designed for human children. Dr. Chantra managed the anesthesia, watching the monitors constantly for any sign that the baby's heart or lungs were failing under the stress. Outside the surgical suite, Somchai sat with Molly, who had been given mild sedatives, but remained alert enough to sense that something important was happening. Her trunk reached toward the surgery door again and again, and her soft rumbles of worry filled the corridor. When Dr. Thompson finally stepped back from the operating table and removed his surgical mask, his face showed exhaustion, but also satisfaction. The repair is complete, he said. Now we must wait to see if her body can heal, and if she has the strength to survive the recovery. Molly Knock was placed in a special area, where Molly could see and touch her baby, but could not accidentally damage the delicate surgical repairs. As the anesthesia wore off and Molly Knock began to wake up, Molly's calls changed from anxious to comforting, the sounds that elephant mothers use to calm frightened babies. The first feeding attempt came 8 hours after surgery. A staff member named Ploy had prepared special elephant formula in a bottle, with a modified nipple designed to work with the repaired palate. Molly Knock, driven by instinct and hunger, latched onto the bottle and began to suck. For several terrible seconds, nothing happened. Then milk began to flow, and Molly Knock swallowed, actually drinking nutrition normally for the first time in her life. The surgical suite erupted in quiet celebration. The repair worked. Now they could only hope it would continue working as the baby grew and healed. Would Molly Knock's repaired palate hold as she grew? And could a mother and baby who had been rejected by the wild ever find a place where they truly belonged? 6 months after the surgery, Molly Knock stood in her enclosure at Elephant Nature Park, using her trunk to grab a hanging toy while her mother watched with patient attention. The baby elephant had gained weight until she was 3 times heavier than her birth weight. Her skin had developed the healthy gray color of a thriving calf, and her playful personality had emerged as she recovered from the trauma of her difficult start. The surgical scar on her palate was healing beautifully, and her ability to nurse from Molly had improved steadily as both mother and baby learned to work with the repaired anatomy. Dr. Chantra stood at the observation deck with Dr. Thompson, who had returned to check on his young patient's progress. They watched Molly Knock tumble through a mud puddle with the clumsy enthusiasm that all healthy baby elephants showed. I have performed hundreds of surgeries, Dr. Thompson said quietly, but I have never felt prouder of a result than this one. Not just because the technique worked, but because of what it represents. A mother's determination combined with human compassion and medical science to save a life that nature had condemned. The Sanctuary had shared updates about Molly Knock's recovery with supporters around the world. Thousands of people followed her progress, celebrating each milestone from her first successful feeding to her first steps outside to her first mud bath. The story had been featured in wildlife films and conservation magazines, not just as a rescue tale, but as a case study in the difficult questions about human interference in nature. Should humans intervene when wild animals face situations that would normally result in death? Where was the line between compassionate help and unnatural interference with evolution? But for Dr. Chantra, the most meaningful part of Molly Knox's recovery was what it revealed about Molly herself. The young mother had proven to be an exceptional parent. She adapted to the special feeding methods required during her baby's recovery. She remained patient with the frequent medical examinations and treatments. She monitored her calf's healing carefully, without becoming overprotective or aggressive toward the human caretakers who were trying to help. Somchai approached with the morning report on all the sanctuary's elephants. Molly and Molly Knock continue to do well, he said, but I have noticed something interesting. The other elephants here are starting to interact with them more. Bua especially keeps approaching their fence and making contact calls, showing signs that she wants to join them. Bua was the older female elephant who had helped raise Molly during her time as an orphan at the sanctuary. She had remained at the park as part of the permanent herd, too used to humans to be released into the wild, but serving an important role in teaching younger elephants. Her interest in Molly and Molly Knock suggested the possibility of bringing them into the sanctuary social group, giving them the elephant companionship that was essential for their well-being. The integration process began carefully, with supervised meetings between Bua and the mother-calf pair. Dr. Chantra watched nervously as the older elephant approached Molly Knock for the first time. Would Bua detect the medical interventions and artificial feeding that marked the baby as different from naturally raised calves? But Bua's response was immediately maternal and accepting. She used her trunk to gently explore Molly Knock's face, including the area where the surgery had been performed, then rumbled softly in what seemed like approval. To Molly, Bua offered a trunk-to-trunk greeting of recognition and welcome, accepting the young mother back into the social group that the wild herd had denied her. Over the following weeks, Molly and Molly Knock were gradually introduced to other elephants in the sanctuary's herd. Each interaction was carefully watched, but the acceptance was universal. The elephants seemed to recognize Molly Knock as a calf needing protection and Molly as a young mother deserving of support. Within a month, they were fully part of the group, with Molly Knock playing with other calves and Molly forming close friendships with several other young mothers. 1 year after the surgery, Dr. Thompson returned to examine Molly Knock and document her progress for a veterinary journal. The calf was now walking confidently, playing energetically with other young elephants, and showing no limitations from her repaired palate. Her ability to make sounds was normal, her feeding was efficient, and her growth rate had caught up to where it should be for her age. From a medical standpoint, Dr. Thompson reported, "This has been a complete success. The repairs have held perfectly and adapted as she grew. There is no indication she will need any further surgery." On a warm afternoon, 18 months after Molly first appeared at the sanctuary fence with her dying calf, Dr. Chantra stood watching the herd, moving through the forest section of their enclosure. Molly Knock, now a strong and confident young elephant, was playing with 3 other calves in mock battles and chasing games that taught important social skills. Molly walked nearby, relaxed but attentive, her own body finally restored to healthy condition after everything she had endured. Bua stood under a large tree, and as Dr. Chantra watched, Molly approached the older elephant and touched her trunk in greeting. The two stood together for several minutes, trunks intertwined, in what looked like gratitude and recognition of the support that had given both mother and baby a second chance at life. Molly Knock would never live in the wild. Her medical history meant she would remain at the sanctuary for life. But she was surrounded by a loving herd, enriched environments, excellent nutrition, and devoted protection from both elephant and human families. As afternoon sunlight painted golden colors across the sanctuary grounds, Molly Knock trumpeted with pure joy, the sound carrying clearly through the forest. It was the sound of a life that almost was not, saved by a mother's love that refused to accept defeat, and by humans who chose to honor that love with their best knowledge and compassion. The reason Molly returned to the sanctuary again and again through rain and rejection was not weakness or failure. It was the strongest force in nature, a mother's love backed by intelligence and determination, seeking every possible chance to save her child's life.